Great. Okay, thanks, Mark. We got a couple of questions came via email, so I thought we would use them as a launch pad to talking about things. First question, and I'd very much like your contributions to this. Can the practice of loving kindness be directed towards loved ones that have passed? How? Can it be received by such beings? What might be the benefits to the meditator and the being? Now, I've got some thoughts about this. But what I thought I'd do is ask, first of all, what are the two aspects when you're practicing loving kindness meditation? What are the two parts of the practice? Because I think it's really germane to understand how what we can do with regards to loving thoughts directed towards people that have died. So, what are the two aspects? Anybody want to answer that?
Well, there's looking over their positive qualities and wishing them happiness and health in the future.
Exactly. So the point I would want to make with it is that if like somebody who has died, they are no longer with us. So you you can't, with the greatest respect, you can't treat them as though they were just in the next room. They have died. Uh, that's not to say that the flow of conscious experience that that is us. It's not to say that that does not continue. It does, but that Auntie Gladys died because that's what happens. So the idea that you can send Auntie Gladys loving thoughts, it's not going to hit the mark because Auntie Gladys has died. Everything to do with Auntie Gladys belonged to this realm, belonged to this life. And now the flow of conscious experience is gone beyond our ability to access. And if Auntie Gladys has got any sense, she won't be hanging around the human realm. Now, there are, when you make that transition, it might be very tempting to hang around the human realm for a bit longer. And maybe I don't know, maybe there is some possibility of some interaction. But the idea is that we want to go forward. So, Auntie Gladys has gone. And so we're left with the memory of Auntie Gladys. And everything about Auntie Gladys is still there. Who is loving kindness? When we practice loving kindness, who is the primary recipient of that wholesome behavior? Who is it intended to help the most? First up.
Ourselves.
Exactly. And when we lose Auntie Gladys, we mourn and we grieve, and quite rightly. As I like to say, even hippos mourn. And if hippos mourn the loss of their loved ones, I think we're entitled to mourn the loss of our loved ones too. So it seems to me that the first person that we help through continuing to think about Auntie Gladys and all her good qualities and everything that we loved about her is that we're helping ourselves pass through the grieving process. So it's a beautiful help. But what we don't want to do accidentally is something that pulls Auntie Gladys back to the human realm. We want to be able to release her completely, to be able to go and stop being Auntie Gladys and become somebody else. The next of life's adventures. So that's my initial thought, is that although you can't contact that person because that person is no longer the person you knew, you are honoring the memory of that person, and you are, through doing that and through being able to release, you are accepting this fundamental aspect of life, which is death. You can't have the arising without the passing away. Otherwise, the arising and the passing away are the two sides of the coin. You have to have both sides of the coin of life. That's what life is. It's arising and passing away, birth and death. So that's my initial thought, is that the loving kindness can certainly help that person through the transition, going through the death process, and that would be encouraged with absolutely anyone, of course. But we have to reach that point of being able to let, in our own minds, allow that person to leave, because they have to move on, and so we don't want to keep on sort of grasping them back. So the kind of reflection that we do after Auntie Gladys has died, remembering all her good qualities, but it's also this letting go and allowing that person to move on. Yeah, as part of the grieving process. Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I do.
No.
Paul, we were talking about the who benefits from loving kindness, and it's the person who is doing the loving kindness. Does that still count if that is kind of known? If it's like, oh, I'm going to do this because I'm going to get some benefit from it.
So would you say that you stopped yourself from being generous towards somebody because you knew it was a wholesome thing to do?
No.
But it is one of the tricks that naysayers will play. They will say, oh, there you go, you're being really selfish, thinking of yourself. As by reflecting on, so like any profitable action, if you reflect on it, that it is indeed a profitable action, it's not saying, and doesn't that make me a brilliant person? It's saying, it's magnifying the potential effects of that action by acknowledging this indeed is a wholesome action. So the effect of loving kindness is the softening, isn't it? And in the instance of grieving the loss of a loved one, there's a lot of hardness there. There can be all kinds of things that arise with the grieving process. And so you want to be able to soften into it, to allow things to move. So it is, in that sense, in reflecting on the loved one's good qualities, even though they've passed, that's going to be hugely beneficial. And reflecting on that and knowing that doesn't make it suddenly somehow a selfish action. Anybody else? Anything to offer? Mandy.
Yeah, I'm thinking in this case you could of course also practice then the metta toward yourself.
Yeah. Yes. As either the metta or the compassion.
Yeah.
Because when you go through the grieving process, it demonstrates that you cared, that you do care, that you are indeed a caring human being.
Yeah, and you're wishing yourself. Probably, I'm thinking, could you then wish yourself well? Well, of course you can. I think in this case, maybe you can wish yourself well, and you can. Yeah.
Because doesn't it? Yes, absolutely. Because doesn't the death of a loved one point up, the most fundamental fact about life? I would suggest to anyone that they do a daily death recollection, not not in a morbid way, but just acknowledging the truth that none of us are, this is a it's just a transitional. Being a human being is just transitional. It's just, we were never here to stay, and that's, of course, that's fundamental to living a spiritual life, is that daily recollection, which is to say, okay, I'm here now. I know that I'm not going to be here forever. How does that adapt the way that you embrace life? How does that adapt the way that you reflect on life? How does that adapt the way you prioritize life? But in no way, shape, or form is it morbid, because the flow of conscious experience goes on, unaltered by dying from the human realm. It's just the process of conscious experience will just keep on going endlessly. So reflecting like that is a really healthy thing to do if it's done with intelligence. If it's not, you don't want to do it in a morbid way. And it also softens you, because you realize, well, absolutely everyone is in this same situation. And so you soften to the people around you, and you are more compassionate to the people around you as a result. You start to see the fragility of the human condition, rather than just always pointing out to yourself all the flaws and the faults in the other person. But yes, absolutely, metta, loving kindness towards oneself, definitely. And again, it's not selfish. Sally, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. Do you think in that case it makes it easier to deal with your mistakes if you know that there is an end to this life, and that although you're going to try and do the best you can in this life to be better, that you've got other lifetimes to work on?
Absolutely. I mean, isn't that one of the beautiful things about the concept of rebirth? That it doesn't all have to be accomplished in one lifetime, and therefore it doesn't. This lifetime does not have to be perfect, and you don't have to be perfect. And there is the spiritual path itself. My two pennyworth. My theory is that people who want to realize enlightenment and put an end to suffering once and for all have to at least go through one death from one human life, having consciously walked the spiritual path. And that isn't to say that they've got to the end of that spiritual path, and it isn't to say that they've even done it particularly well, but they were conscious of the spiritual path. They've gone through the death process. At some point, they've come back into another human realm, and then they apply themselves to the path in a far more diligent and dedicated fashion in order to finish the job. So I think for everyone, there has to be at least one rebirth, consciously walking a spiritual path. And what does that, if that were true, and that's only my speculation, but if it were true, what does that tell you? It tells you that, yeah, you're allowed to make loads of mistakes. My whole life is, well, it's just a succession of errors all the way through. But hopefully the idea is that you learn from them, of course. And so I think adopting that let yourself off the hook attitude is really healthy. You're allowed
Not
to make errors.
completely.
Sorry.
Not completely though. Not completely though.
Well, if there's the willingness to learn from,
Yeah.
so you're taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think practicing loving kindness towards yourself, that's the compassion side, isn't it? I'm prepared to take responsibility for these feelings, which are dark and painful, because I know that I mucked up. And say, I can see the past action, and I'm experiencing the present results, and I accept that burden, knowing that it's temporary, and knowing that life will go on. and that compassion towards oneself is a very necessary adjunct to following a spiritual way, because it is about taking responsibility. It means you can no longer be the victim. It means you can no longer cast blame around. But the offshoot is the what you get back from taking responsibility is the ability to then master action and result. So, I think only the Buddha would reach such a point that he never made an error. I think everyone else, absolutely everyone else, is prone to falling into error because it's just the human condition. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, not at all. Right. Shall I give the other question a go? Unless anyone else had another observation they wanted to make. I think the next question and the answer to the next question will put a context, a different context on what we've just been discussing. Let's see. That's if I can. Here it is. My filing system. Right. So this is quite a long question, but I think it's a really good question and it deserves a thorough answering. Could you please explain what you mean by separateness, or you can think of it as non-separateness? To expand, I can see that we're not separate from anything, animate or inanimate, past or present in the universe. Since the dawn of time, every creature and plant that has ever lived has breathed the same air. The air that I breathe in has been breathed millions of times by other creatures and plants, all the way back to the first amoebas and all the way up to my husband sitting beside me. The food we eat has breathed the same air, and body tissues that we make from that food all goes back into the soil, whilst both living and after death, to be reformed into new creatures and plants, all as a single piece of tapestry and as part of a continuous cycle of life. Since I can see this as an inexperienced and unenlightened meditator, clearly this cannot be what the Buddha is referring to. It's too simple. There must be another type of separation or non-duality that you mean. So could you please explain further? It's a really good question. So it's undoubtedly the case, first off, that this person is absolutely correct, that there is this influence that these apparently separate and discrete elements of life have with one another. And so there is interconnection, definitely, between all these discrete objects. Also correct that that's not the end of the story. So it's just a question of how you try to put this across. And I've thought about this and I've thought about this. So here goes. I hope you can keep up with this, or I hope I can put it across in a way that is understandable. So I think a couple of analogies will really help. And the first analogy is one that I use a lot, well, both I use a lot. The first is to understand conditionality at a more fundamental level. If we take the example of a rainbow, we know that a rainbow is an illusory object. We define it as a rainbow, but we know that it's nothing without the conditions that help to make it appear. There are necessary conditions for a rainbow to appear. If those conditions are not met, there's no rainbow. If those conditions are met, like light through the atmosphere, rain, if those conditions are met, you get the rainbow effect. If one of those conditions changes, there's no rainbow. So the rainbow is appears, it originates through conditions. It is condition-dependent origination. And what we do, our tendency, is when we fixate, perceptually fixate, conceptualize rainbow as an idea, and we impose that idea upon what's taking place, we arbitrarily cut away all those conditions. So we create this bounded experience that we're calling a rainbow, but we have disregarded all the necessary conditions for that experience to happen. So we have this separation from conditions, but that is a false perception, in the sense that if you take one of those conditions away, the rainbow wouldn't happen. So that's the nature of language, that's the nature of perception, is to create division between things. So when we conceptualize the world of different objects and people and things, men, mountains and trees and so forth, we are binding them. We're creating this shell, perceptual shell around things, this skin around things, and saying, this is this thing over here, and this is this thing over here. And they might have a relationship, but what we've done is we have arbitrarily ripped the conditions, the necessary conditions, away from that thing in order to make it a standalone thing. And so the conventional world appears as though it's like this solid, substantial dimension of time and space with all these individual existing things within them, but that conventional reality is not taking into account the necessary conditions that go to make up a thing. And if you take one of those conditions away, that thing doesn't exist. And we know it in meditation. When you get beyond the hindrances and you start to delve more deeply into you immerse yourself in the observation of experience at the ultimate level, you start to see this very, very clearly. If there's a sound, there has to be a working ear. And there has to be hearing. If there's no hearing, there's no sound. If there's no sensitive matter of the physical ear, there's no sound, there's no hearing. There is a dependency for that experience to occur. It is dependent in exactly the same way as with the rainbow. It is dependent on there being those conditions. And so when we say a sound is occurring, we're delineating sound and we're cutting it away from all its necessary conditions. Right? Good so far? So as you meditate more and more, you come to realize that there is this, and what I'm going to say here is, it's a symbolic way of trying to describe what's unfolding. And I think, so what you have to do really, you have to just acknowledge that the spoken word is symbolic, but there's a kind of hidden silent communication that's riding on the wings of the words that I'm using. So imagine you've got this sea of phenomena, and it's a vibrant, creative, it's scintillating with creative possibility and potential. And it's an endless sea. It's vast. There's no boundary to it at all. It's a vast sea of creative potential. And we know that in a body of water, like an ocean, you get waves that form on the surface. So you've got this undifferentiated, boundless ocean of potential. And then you've got these waves forming. And the wave that forms may be hearing, and another wave that forms may be sound, and another wave that forms may be perception, birdsong. So out of this unbounded sea of creative potential, you have arising, forming, expressing itself, qualities such as an object and qualities such as the knowing of an object. Now, the thing about waves in the ocean, are the waves something different from the ocean? No, it's all water. It's all the same undifferentiated thing, for want of a better word, but it takes on, the ocean takes on these very temporary, momentary forms. So in terms of the five aggregates, you'd say that that sea of creative potential brings forth materiality, brings forth feeling, brings forth perception, brings forth mental formations, brings forth consciousness. And they're all momentary. They're like points, scintillating points, arising and passing away in this sea of creative potential. And what we do when we practice meditation is we observe these aggregates as they arise. They're not arising out of the sea. They are the sea. They're not separate. So anything that is formed out of those aggregates is the sea. So you have the aggregates arising. They have an interdependent relationship to one another. And in their interdependent play, they then create the conventional reality. But the conventional reality is the sea, the vast, limitless, boundless sea. The aggregates are waves in this boundless, undifferentiated sea. And the arising of these building blocks of experience are momentary. They arise, they pass away, but through their play, they create the conventional way of seeing the world. So when we are in meditation and there arises an object, for the person who doesn't understand, they tend to believe that it is I that am aware of this external object to me. And so there is this belief in a duality. There is me, and then there is the object, which is separate from me. So there is this sense of separation. But it's all the same thing. It's the sea. The knowledge of the object itself is arising as a wave in the sea, but also the knowledge of the object is arising in the same sea. It's the same thing. It's all unbounded creative potential expressing itself momentarily in this form. Literally don't think I could say it any other way. Don't know how else to put it across. So the mistake that people make and that causes the sense of division, the error code in all of this is simply the belief that the feeling, the perception, the materiality, the mental formations, the consciousness relate to a separate self, something or someone who either is those aggregates, who owns those aggregates, is to be found within those aggregates, or those aggregates are to be found within them. And it's just, the error code is simply that belief that the feeling is me, mine, or myself. Okay, so as meditators, what we're doing is we are delineating, we are saying, well, that's a feeling, that's a perception, that's material, that's a sound, that's a mental formation of, I don't know, wanting it to be different, that's a painful feeling, that's knowing the painful feeling, that's knowing the perception, that's knowing the materiality, that's consciousness, all arising and passing away. And so we are at that level still have this process of delineating and cutting the aggregate arbitrarily away from the conditions that go to make it up. But what happens is there is this moment of earth-shattering recognition through this persistent observation of the truth that things are arising and passing away due to conditions, that reality has no separate bits. It's not bounded at all. That sea of phenomena is truly unbounded. There is no way at all for the mind to encompass that. So the mind, I had this really brilliant quote the other day. This gentleman said, the mind acts in limited ways, which means the mind is always delineating. It's always putting things into pigeonholes. It's delineating things. It's saying that's that, that's that. Whether it's something small like a feeling or a tactile sensation, or if it's something big like the universe or God, it's still containing it within a concept. And that's the limited aspect of the mind's behavior. So the mind always acts in a limited way. But what the mind is has no boundary whatsoever. It's not contained. There is no containment in reality. And when you discover the truth that indeed there are no things because everything is interdependent upon everything else and nothing stands alone, there is this utter release, this most amazing transformation in outlook. But the mind in its limited aspect of doing intellectually cannot grasp it. It cannot be grasped intellectually because intellectual grasping is a limited thing. And what's been discovered is that you can't say the vast expanse because it's dimensionless. It's dimensionless because it's got nothing containing it. It's not contained in anything. So when we say nirvana, when we say nirvana, when we say reality, when we say truth, when we say whatever it is we say about it, we're containing it. We're giving it a boundary. But this is truly boundless. And there is no separation at all. So, well, I'm glad I got that off my chest. Any thoughts about that? I know I've just sort of whacked you with that. Mandy?
No, sorry, that was applause.
Oh, it was applause. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, there's this discovery of the boundless. It's not contained at all. Any containment would render it a limited thing, something that you could point at. But that unboundedness does have qualities, nonetheless. Like the quality of perfection, the quality of absolute knowing. So it's gnosis. Because it's gnosis, there's an absolute understanding. There's also wisdom and compassion. But can you see what we're doing? It's utterly spontaneous. It is both empty, because there's no delineation anywhere to be found, and yet it is utter, boundless creative potential. And that potential has to, because it's creative, it has to express itself. Because if it doesn't express itself, then it's not being creative. But it is fundamentally creative, so it must express itself. And it expresses itself as this. What you're thinking is your experience is actually the expression of boundless, timeless, dimensionless mystery. I'm trying not to use the word divine because people misinterpret the word divine. But if we recognize, I'm not saying divine in the sense of creator God. I'm saying divine as in really, really nice. Oh, that's divine. Then in that case, it's divine. It is divine mystery. But it's just this. It's just this. But it's just this, free from, or not even free from that process of closing off. You understand the whole process of why it is that conceptualizing and separating off has to happen. So there's a total understanding that everything is perfectly all right at all times. Everything is absolutely, it couldn't be any other way. It's everything that emerges is an expression of the divine mystery. And part of the perfection is you never solve the mystery. Because if you were to solve the mystery, what would you do? Where would be the fun? So the mystery is part of the perfection. It's not that you solve the mystery, it's just you immerse yourself. You realize that everything that is unfolding is simply an expression of, even if it's just looking at a cat. It's like it's utterly transformed from being this closed off ordinary experience that I was just looking at a cat, that's meaningless, to being the absolute and utter expression of divine mystery. And the reason I think this is so important, why I want to talk, witter on about it, or rant, or whatever you want to call it. The reason I want to do that is because otherwise we get sucked into this view of Buddhism as just a process of trying to get better at stuff. I mean, okay. But this is a little bit more than just trying to get better at stuff. This is realizing your inherent nature as an expression of divine mystery, which is why I've taken to calling this the higher path, contemplative mysticism. Because it's taking you far beyond the petty squabbles that go on in the world and in our culture. And I guess for the vast majority of people, they've just got no interest. It doesn't mean anything to them. It doesn't resonate with them. And so they are tied in and caught up with those petty concerns. But here's an opportunity for everyone to realize what's really unfolding moment by moment. And it's so much more than, it's overflowing with just creative potency and love and wisdom and joy. And people, the vast majority of people miss it. And that's why I don't want our center and what we do to merely operate on that level of, well, how can I be a bit nicer? You need a foundation, a moral foundation to this path, absolutely. But the purpose of the path is not, it's more than just getting on with each other in that separated out way. It's going beyond that to truly realize non-separateness, because therein lies, just this endless ocean of what you've always wanted life to be. It is. So the weird thing with this is it's like literally me talking into a vacuum. If anyone has got anything they would like to say or add, you're very, very welcome.
I think we're all just very much enjoying your description, Paul. It's very clear, concise, and it's wonderful to see how much you enjoy describing it.
Yes, absolutely. Because otherwise we're just, this is the brilliance of the Buddha's teaching. This is the brilliance of it. It goes so. But do you know what I mean about how it's so impossible for the limited action of the mind to comprehend it. So it's not something that you can grasp with the thinking mind, which is why I can see why symbolism is so, symbolizing it as this vast ocean of creative potential. It's like what's lying underneath. It's what's being sent to you silently with the words. Lucy, hello. Oh, I can't hear you, Lucy. You have to unmute yourself. Hi.
Hi. So why is it not normal and natural for human beings to feel part of the ocean? Why does it seem to be the norm that we don't feel part of the ocean, that we do feel separate? Is this a sort of dirty trick on the part of somebody?
Well, you think it's an awful trick, but actually it's very necessary. So it's ignorance. So the blindness to this, and in the blindness to this, there is an error code which could be summed up as the I am conceit. So in our ignoring of the ocean, we assume selfhood and apply the term me or mine or myself to feelings, to perceptions, to mental formations, to consciousness, to materiality. And in doing that, we fixate on the conventional universe as being absolutely real. But it's no more real than the rainbow. But the more you immerse yourself in looking at all of this, you come to a point where you realize that the I am conceit itself, the ignorance, the error code, is itself an expression of the divine mystery. So there's nothing wrong. Even with the ignorance and the I am conceit, when it's seen, when it's understood, you go, oh yeah, of course. I mean, everything just sort of plops into place. And even because nothing can be outside the ocean, because the ocean is not contained. So you can't say that, well, the error code is not part of an expression of that divine ocean of unending creative possibility, because it quite clearly is. It's just from that point on, the ignorance has been sundered. The veil has has dropped. There's no more, or raised, or whichever way. I'm never quite sure whether the veil goes up or comes down at the end. Does it come down and then you're blinded and then it goes up and you know, or does it come up to blind you and then fall down to know? If someone can, out of everyone, I'm the one who's supposed to know that. Oh yeah, it's curtains. Yeah, of course it's. So you have to operate from the premise that, okay, I don't know, I don't see. Let's have a look. And that's what the path is, because there's nothing wrong. And everything that I've just described, there is a reality behind all of that. And it is all unfolding now. It is this. So it's just a question whether somebody is willing to do the exploring, which is what Vipassana is. Yeah. Mark, you've got your hand up. Thanks, Lisa. That's a great question.
Yeah, I was just going to following on from Lucy's question about what it is that conditions ignoring. I was going to say or ask, is it language? Is it the evolving of languages that is, well, maybe partly one of the reasons why we're veiled or behind the curtains, because of language being a description and therefore separate.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, yeah, because we conceptualize, we bound things with the concepts, but in that case, that would make all the dogs and cats enlightened, and it would make everyone pre-history enlightened, and it just isn't the case. And I think that it's like in terms of the spiritual endeavor, the modern human being is the apex in terms of spiritual matters, and so a being working their way up, conventionally speaking, the being working their way up through their behavior to the human realm, and then as long as they don't muck it up completely, coming back to the human realm a few times, where language not only defines reality, but language at least points people in the direction of truth and how to discover it directly for themselves. Does that cover it, Mark? It's like you need sufficient mental capacity. You need your spiritual faculties to be developed to a degree where you can actually make sense of the Buddha's teaching and then immerse oneself in the exploration of conscious experience.
Yeah,
so
and I guess
you need language.
I was also thinking, actually, after I asked the question, that you kind of have to have language, because otherwise, how would it be taught? I mean, how would it have been taught from person to person? Even if the description is a description, you kind of need something, right?
Oh, yeah, it's all symbolic, isn't it? All language is just symbols trying to point towards something, and we operate on this. I know you like me using the word consensual. We've got this consensual reality, a reality that we all agree upon. So we say that's a dog, that's a cat, and we all agree upon it because it makes life doable. Yeah. So does that make sense? So in that sense, yeah. I mean, Buddhas do point the way. I mean, had the Buddha been able to say, I know it's you get accounts in the Pali Canon of monks listening to the Buddha and then becoming enlightened. But what they were doing, and perhaps this is something you can do with everything I've just been talking about, which is to just rewatch it and listen to it as you're paying attention to things arising and passing away. Because what I'm actually trying to convey, like I said, is impossible to convey. So the symbols, the words, carry with them a silent message. And it's whether somebody can just sit and rest, content in the moment, and just watch what's actually unfolding, and realize that everything that is arising, and here I go again, this is just symbolic, everything that arises is an expression of the divine mystery. Everything. And that all that's happening is like, by defining it, we're cutting it off from the necessary conditions that create it. So it's got no independent reality at all. So there is no separation between anything. But it's not the words, because the words can either be accurate or, you know, inaccurate. They can be relatively close or far off, but they can never be the truth. They can never express the truth, because truth is uncontainable. It cannot be bounded. It cannot be bound. It is yeah. So as a thought experiment, we can define something. It could be just a piece of fruit, an apple. And in defining that apple as an apple, you cut it off from everything else. So you've got two states. You've got apple and then everything else which is not apple. How far does not apple extend? Answers on a postcard, please. And then you get a sense of it. You get a sense of what containment is. Conceptual containment, perceptual containment. You contain. You have this undifferentiated, and then you perceptually create something, and it's bound. It's contained with it. This. So what's everything else? And how far does everything else? And you go, well, no, it does. It's endless. It's boundless. It's got no. You'd have to create another perception in order to bound that space. Well, I've just called it a space, the not apple space. By just defining it as the not apple space, I've contained it. So what lies outside of that? What lies outside of the not apple space? I don't even believe what I'm just saying. But you see the problem. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Has anybody else got any other thoughts about this?
Oh, I was just thinking, Paul,
Sarah,
we don't have to be able to grasp the depth of that in order to practice, and that's brilliant.
You can't. I mean, that's the point I'm making. It's like the very act of the mind reducing it to thoughts. That's what, when the mind acts, that's what it does. So it's always limited. You're always limited to thoughts. And so the culmination of the path is the point at which you've seen the arising and passing away of this whole sea of phenomena again and again and again. You've seen the way it constructs conventional reality again and again, and you've seen it from every single possible angle. You know there aren't any apples. You know there aren't any cats. You know that there's no separation between anything. And then there's this final moment when you stop trying to contain the path, you stop trying to contain the spiritual search, you stop trying to contain nibbana inside something that you can own and control, and you just stop and you relax deeply, psychologically, spiritually. You relax, and in that moment of relaxation there is the total, oh, it's always been this, it's timeless perfection, it's always been like this. Yeah. So you can't grasp it, because it is seeing through the whole grasping nature of the mind, grasping by applying perceptions onto things, and trying to own it and control it and be the master of it. the ocean can't be the master of the ocean. It's no need. And that's the brilliant thing is like from that point on, anything that arises is just, the knowing of a thing is no different than the thing known. And yet there's this beautiful, expressive display of the power of this uncontainable creative potential. It's just sling one of these together for you. Look, there's a cat. Oh, just there in the moment, just expressing itself, just blooming. Yeah, just coming into being in that moment for you to go, oh. And the person and the going, oh, is no different than the thing that's just bloomed. It's just another blooming, another expression of the undifferentiated, timeless, dimensionless perfection. Divine mystery thing. So, yeah. So, yeah, to get back to your point, Sarah, no possibility. The closest you can get to it is the practice of loving kindness. Now, and this actually does bring me back to the first question. So how do we feel about someone who dies? Where do they go? When an ocean wave finally comes crashing into the shore and is obliterated, where does the wave go?
Hasn't gone anywhere.
It was just the ocean. The wave was a series of discrete moments of rising. It was just the energy of the wind or whatever on the surface of the wave. There was no wave to die. Waves don't die. It's just a movement through the water. There's just the ocean. There's just the water. It's only in the constructed version of life that there is this sense of something having been lost. But if somebody realizes that every feeling, every perception, every knowledge of that feeling, every knowledge of that perception is just an expression of that, are just waves in that ocean, there's nothing to die. It's deathlessness. It's what the Buddha called the realization of Nibbana, deathlessness. There never was anything to die. Anybody got any other thoughts? Amazingly, I've been going an hour. Yeah. I think
there's
Joe.
There's a common saying that we hear often about the universe experiencing itself. What are your thoughts on that phrase?
What I would say is that with a little bit of consideration, with a little bit of careful thought, you can go, yeah, I can see that. But that's very different from realizing it. Yeah. So people can say, absolutely, it's just the universe knowing itself. Absolutely it is. But has somebody realized that? And that's why you need the path. And it really, really helps to hear that said, and it helps to hear it said over and over again, and it really helps to hear the silent message that comes with the words. Most definitely does. But it's only through the actual practice of noting again and again and again that you come to a point of realization, which is a very different order of knowing. It's true gnosis, as opposed to an intellectual grasp. But yeah, absolutely. That's all that's happening right now. I think I've weirded you all out. All right, so I've been talking an hour. Oh my goodness. Is there anything else anyone would like to add?
So who creates the ocean?
You see what you've done there?
I've limited it, yes.
Yes, exactly that. And so you've created something, and anything created therefore has to have a creator. But if it's unlimited, if it's not bound in any way, shape, or form, it's timeless. It's dimensionless. Yeah. So it's just it is beyond all concepts, all possible concepts. It's beyond all consideration at all in any way, shape, or form. But it's I mean, Lucy, what you said is, absolutely the right thing to ask. But I think you knew the answer as well, so which is great.
That was absolutely amazing, Paul. I love that.
Great. Brilliant. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
I've been wanting to say that. Could you tell? Break out. This is what you need to know. Yeah. And like, I don't expect everyone's light bulbs to go on. It doesn't work like that. But it's all like little drips in the bucket. It's all, I mean, essentially, I go back to that point that I made before, which is, I don't want this to just be about, making life a bit better. Do you know what I mean? It's like, no, that's just, it's petty. There's so much more. And that's what and just encouraging people and trying to point that out to people, so that if you want the path of truly a path of a contemplative mystic, it's there for you in the Buddha's teaching. It's absolutely there for you. Okay. Right. I think we should leave it there.
Thank you, Paul. That was really inspiring.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Paul. Wonderful talk. Loved it.
Good. So that's why I suggest, if you have a care to, play that back when you're quiet in your mind and you're just observing things arise and pass away, and just let it play. Don't try to work it out. Just let it play. See what happens.